Hello, everyone. So I just thought I would do my cold thoughts on what I just read in The Gay Science. I'm on book 5. So if you haven't read The Gay Science or don't know about it, then what he means is basically like the happy science. He thinks that he critiques science in a way like he doesn't think that science should, or scientific thought should equate to, what is solid and stands for like truth with a capital T. He thinks science should always, he doesn't want science to be dogmatic or kind of fall into being a religion in itself, with, sort of this steadfast faith and conviction, even though conviction and passion have their places in science. He thinks that, we should always be humble because, and that makes sense, right? Because there's paradigm shifts all the time. What was true in science's day, sometimes 10, 20 years ago is, it changes, it evolves. And then he says that we should take that idea of this science. So in a way, the happy science kind of means like, let's not take ourselves too seriously, right? Let's be lighthearted and, in a sense, and passionate and, like try to keep moving forward in a sense. So, so that's what he means. And so we should apply this, as I was saying before I interrupted myself, we should apply this to, everything. We should always have a scientific mindset, but the particular scientific mindset that includes a healthy dose of skepticism. We should apply that to, let's say, areas like morality, which he really tries to argue that, Nietzsche really tries to argue that, we need to look at morality not as something that is inherent or universal or that can be applied to everyone as a law, but it would serve us to question the current, whatever the current morality is, cultural mores, and trace it historically. Look at the origins of the moral sort of system that most human beings in a particular culture or time, submit to. And because he feels as if, a lot of our ideas and our practices are constructed. So they're not natural or inherent. And I knew I was going to lose my train of thought. Okay, it'll come back to me probably. I mean, I think that is it. Yeah, so morality. I just had something else to say. We can do this in class too. We should question morality and yeah, in a lighthearted way again. So the gay science, a happy scientific way. Nietzsche really depends on the individual. He's very anti-idol in a sense. Like he doesn't even want you to read him and make an idol out of him, because then that would depart from his belief system of being an individual and striking out on your own and figuring it out and not falling into easy certainties about anything, really. So I read, I don't know if we call them aphorisms, sections, but I'm just going to call it sections because some of these are long and they're not aphorisms. Let's see. 344 on my 280 to page 292. So section 349 is what I did. So I'm just going to read some of the parts that I highlighted and give you my thoughts. So the first section, 344, is how we too are still pious. He says, in science, convictions have no rights of citizenships, as one says, with good reason. Only when they decide to descend to the modesty of hypotheses of a provisional experimental point of view of a regulative fiction, they may be granted admission and even a certain value in the realm of knowledge. So for my students, if you're watching and listening, if you read the unassigned introduction from our philosophy textbook, it talks about how there's this one section that opens at saying some people would value philosophy less because really only scientific inquiry and the certainty that it brings is what's valid. We want to know, we want to be able to be certain as human beings, right? It's distressing when there's not a particular hard, steadfast answer to one of our most important questions. You know, a lot of people can't really deal with that. But Nietzsche would say falling into certain paths such as religion, so he is sort of, he's an atheist, a staunch atheist. There's no way to sugarcoat it. But falling into any sort of ready-made, comfortable kind of, blueprint of life, that he feels is just kind of like, I don't know, a weak way out. We should be, in a sense, he kind of aligns with, the existentialists and the absurdists who feel that, yes, it is absurd that human beings are meaning-seeking kind of beings. We want answers. Some of our most important questions, the universe is silent on. And Nietzsche says, all right, let's celebrate. That's fine, but we shouldn't deceive ourselves and lie to ourselves. And neither should we do this in science. So this really, section 344, I feel, is a good sort of explanation of his title. So he says science should always be under police supervision, under the police of mistrust. So therein lies Nietzsche's sort of thread of skepticism. He feels that there should always be a healthy dose of doubt. So he says a little later that we see, though, that unfortunately, he doesn't say unfortunately, that's just clarifying. Science also, well, hold on. Maybe I should read this first, reread it again. Okay, we see that science also rests on a faith. There simply is no science without presupposition. So is he critiquing here or is he explaining? I think that he's critiquing because he is critiquing the unconditional will to truth. I feel like in a sense he's kind of doing both a little bit. I think when I read this, I felt like he was doing both. He was critiquing and then kind of describing in a neutral sort of way. Again, so what that means is, on the one hand, he wants us to mistrust and kind of do away with dogmatic faith and belief. But then he talks about, earlier in the Gay Science, temporary habits. Like he never wants a habit to be eternal. He always wants to evolve. But habits for, a certain time, that's how we live. That's how, I don't know, like he's supportive of it. So I think he would be supportive of a kind of faith. It's kind of like you can't really see Nietzsche as black and white. He's all about nuances. Like when he says that we shouldn't have certainty, he's not an extreme skepticist. He says we shouldn't have easy certainty. So there's always two sides of the coin. Right? It's not that, because he says, again, in religion, you would read him, you might read him as being very anti-religious, and in a way he is. But he also says in this section, so we'll probably get to it again, he also says that religions don't start out in weakness. Religions don't start out in insecurity. Religions start out in a very gay science way. Seeing a problem in the world and wanting to fix it, being passionate, doing exactly what Nietzsche is doing. Like Nietzsche, if you read Thus Spake Zarathustra, is it Thus Spoke Zarathustra? I never know. If you read that, it seems like this manifesto, this religious kind of like hyper, just, I don't know, religious manifesto. Like he's borrowing from religion. It sounds very much like he's modeling Jesus and being on the mountain and going out and trying to save the world, and the world's not really ready. But then also, adding his new, his own sort of prophecies and interpretations. But he thinks that following religion is weak because, again, you're not striking out on your own. Everyone needs to create their own religion in a sense. Maybe not religion exactly, but so he wants people to think for themselves, and he wants people to struggle and have a lifelong struggle, which sounds like an existentialist to me. But I have this issue with kind of labeling probably too many philosophers as existentialists. But philosophies overlap, right? Okay, so and in a lot of his works, and then the beginning of Daybreak, is it Daybreak? I think, I don't know. I've read too many Nietzsche books at this point, and still yet not enough. He talks about how, why do we think that it's good to tell the truth or be honest or seek the truth? Because he also talks about, and I'm always getting ahead of myself, but it's also in the section that I read. He talks about how if there is divinity, if there is a divine being, the divine being isn't perfect. The divine being is filled with error. Error is perfect. This sort of deception is perfect, because I think he sees deception, and again, it's a translation, right? I'm reading in English. I can't read in the German. So whatever, was translated as deception in my English version, has something about creativity and imagination and being able to strike forth, and this is how we grow and this is how we expand. So he's always trying to make us question what we take for granted and overturn. Like, we can use a metaphor from the Christian scriptures, Jesus going through the marketplace and overturning the money changers of the marketplace, because he was angry that what they were doing to faith and spirituality. He was upset with the status quo, basically. And so is Nietzsche. Nietzsche is, in a sense, like, he draws from Christianity just so much. He has like a love-hate relationship with it, I think. So never put Nietzsche in a box that he is this. Like, there's always nuance. So he says all that to say, on my 281, he asks, but why not deceive? Why not allow oneself to be deceived? Like, he always sees that there's space for liberation in what we wouldn't expect, which I think is really interesting. He says, one does not, going on with this sort of idea of deception and truth, which I think I very poorly introduced, so you'll have to forgive my stream of consciousness, sort of. I tie up all the ends in the end, I hope, or at some point. So going on with this idea about truth and questioning and wanting to strike out on our own and be happy and imaginative and creative, he says one does not want to allow oneself to be deceived because one assumes that it is harmful, dangerous, calamitous to be deceived. But he's questioning it because he wants to question everything, because that, in a way, I mean, that's what a philosopher is, right? Sort of, I mean, that's why certain areas no longer belong to philosophy, because we have too much certainty for them. Whatever is kind of uncertain belongs in philosophy. And I think Nietzsche wants to bring everything. He wants to philosophize everything. Or many things, I guess. So he questions, how is that? Is wanting not to allow oneself to be deceived really less harmful? What do you know in advance? It's trying to break down the ego of everyone. What do you know in advance of the character of existence to be able to decide whether the greater advantage is on the side of the unconditionally mistrustful, or of the unconditionally trusting? So he says something next as, maybe both is required. I mean, Nietzsche critiques, alongside Christianity, he critiques Buddhism, and might misread it if you look at him very literally. But, he... Oh, okay. But he also very much, like, he aligns with Christian thought and uses the rhetoric and just is amazed by its metaphors, and sees, use in them. He also aligns with Buddhism, because he's talking about, in the next part, he's talking about the middle way, that we shouldn't be too extreme. And he says that, okay, we'll get to it. He kind of reiterates this idea again later. He wants to incorporate everything, even as he kind of has a polemic, it seems like an intense polemic against certain paths. And I mean, he does, but then he kind of, in a sense, like, backtracks and, finds some use for some of it at the right time. And that's very much Buddhism, right? Buddhism has this metaphor of, even you shelve Buddhism, you depart from Buddhism when it has served its purpose, and you're the time to move on. The metaphor is the raft. You have your raft, you build it, and then you use it to take you across the river. But once you get across the river, like, set down the raft, like, and the raft is like symbolic of, like, an essential teaching that helped you at some point in your life. And so, Nietzsche is also such a Buddhist and a Christian. So that's what it seems like. I can just see it. All right, so okay, so that's, that this section is actually quite long. Let's see. So he's trying to point out that our ways of being, like, we are already deceiving ourselves anyway by trying to not deceive ourselves, because of what we feel like we are convicted of. Specifically, and we can be convicted of anything, right? But he's specifically talking about here our will to truth, also our valuing of a particular kind of morality, and our sort of approach to the world. He really critiques Schopenhauer at some point in this, because Schopenhauer is oftentimes labeled as the sort of paragon of pessimism, right? And I guess, and you would see that. I know a lot of people like Schopenhauer because he's so sort of raw and honest about how life can be disappointing and difficult, and so a lot of people are comforted by that, because they read Schopenhauer and think, oh, finally someone said it. It's not just me, someone said it. But so Schopenhauer's idea is, or his sort of mindset or perspective is that, human beings are not generally happy. If we're really honest, he says, human beings are not happy. And even if, and maybe, and so something is wrong with the world. There's a disconnect between the world and human beings. The world is not satisfying. Life is not, the human predicament is not satisfying. Life is not satisfying. But then he also, Schopenhauer says at some point that even if we were given a world that we think we would be happy in, we still would find something to be unhappy about. So Schopenhauer not only critiques like the life out there, he also critiques human beings. So, but Nietzsche is all about laughing and being joyful and, you know, trying to be powerful. He doesn't like anything that's weak. And so he questions this, he questions the ego and the pride and the humanism in that perspective. You know, he says in this next part, and maybe also further on, that, you know, why do you think that as human beings, the world is supposed to be good for you? You know, I mean, because he says right here, so now I can finally get back to the text. Why have morality at all when life, nature, and history are not moral? No doubt those who are truthful in an audacious and ultimate sense, that is, presupposed by the faith in science, thus affirm another world. Like you are affirming, he says, with your sentiments and convicted ideas about either Schopenhauer's pessimism or an easy optimism, that the world is orderly, kind of looking at kind of a, you know, Francis Bacon mechanistic, positivistic approach to science, which says that, you know, we just have to keep working. We're going to find answers to everything. We're going to keep progressing and keep evolving and get to this sort of utopia of perfection, you know, in our knowledge, and then apply that knowledge. And so, you know, so Nietzsche kind of questions this and says that that's not really the world you're living in, you know, human beings. He says that life, nature, and history are not moral. And so, and he doesn't say this here, but he would probably, I mean, it's mysterious. Like he feels that. So he's going back and forth about how he talks about faith. And here is the quote about the divine. All right. So he says that, and also his admission, I think, at least, that he has some Christian elements to himself. He says, we godless anti-metaphysicians still take our fire too from the flame lit by a faith that is thousands of years old. So we can't, you know, we're rooted, again, Buddhism, we're the lotus rooted in the mud. We can't detach ourselves or we would, you know, die. So we would not exist. So we're rooted in the ancient, even Nietzsche. That Christian faith, which was also the faith of Plato, which, you know, anachronistically, right? Or no? Yes. I feel that let's just say this, I feel that there are some overlaps with Christianity borrowed a lot from Plato. Let's say that. Christianity is very Platonic. And so we see, like, looking through a lens of understanding Christianity, we see Plato, like when you read the Republic, he just has this idea, even though, you know, he lived in a polytheistic culture, and Plato and Socrates were polytheists in the sense that, I mean, maybe that's not exactly fair to say, because every place had their local god, you know, that it was the top god, but still, yes, polytheism. Still just very, you could see like Christian ideas, traditional Christian Protestant ideas of order and the eternal spirit, and kind of devaluing the body and in a sense the senses, and trying to tame this wild sort of, thinking about Plato's Chariot, trying to tame this sort of wild instinct so that we can, you know, be our enlightened higher selves in a sense. So anyway, that was a caveat that I probably need to explain a little more some other time when I'm talking about the Republic. But anyway, I just see it here, and he says it, and I love that. Okay, so that Christian faith, which was also the faith of Plato, that God is the truth, that truth is divine. But what if this should become more and more incredible? If nothing should prove to be divine any more, unless it were error, blindness, the lie. If God himself should prove to be our most enduring lie. So, you know, there's a couple of layers to that, right? That a true God would be someone truly sacred, would encompass error and encompass, what else does he says? Blindness and a lie. But then also, of course, you know, he feels like religion is a lie, not the instinct to religion from the creator of whatever religion he's talking about, but the sort of blind following of it is the lie. So in a sense, like, again, two sides of the coin, trying to uphold the value of the lie, but then also critiquing something as a lie. So very interesting. All right, I was just wondering if I should stop there. So much more. I just went through one section. That was just one section. Okay, I think I will stop there because, you know, attention spans and everything. So, and that was 26 minutes. So yeah, so maybe I'll come back and do more today or another day, but just some interesting things, you know, from at least one section that I read. So I really like the Gay Science. I think it starts out with poems. It ends, I think, with a poem. So it just has everything in here. I can't remember, but if this is correct or not. But I think maybe Nietzsche had said the Gay Science was his most personal sort of work. Maybe, I don't know. All right, well, thank you for listening to just my random thoughts on, I kind of went over everything that I read, mentioned it. So thanks for listening, and I will see you all next time.